us Dr. Khalil Shikaki of the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research in Ramallah. He's live from Ramallah today. Thank you so much for being with us, sir. He's the founding director of the Institute. Since 2005, he's been a senior fellow at the Crown Center for Middle Eastern Studies at Brandeis, received his PhD in political science from Columbia University, and has taught at several Palestinian American universities. Today, we're going to be talking about the slogan, "From the River to the Sea." I think people who are familiar with Israel-Palestinian, the subject of Israel-Palestinian, the conflict and history are familiar with it. But it's come into the public today. Dr. Marc Lamont Hill, who was participating in the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian People at the UN on November 29th, invoked it in a speech he gave, and it set off a political firestorm. CNN cut ties with him, although his university, his host university, Temple University, has supported him. So I just wanted to get from you an explanation of what does this slogan mean, where does it come from, and we'll have questions going forward.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be with you. Obviously, it depends on who you are when you say something like this. The issue of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is over land, obviously, and there has been two ideas that have been put forward to resolve the conflict. One idea is the partition, and the partition is about a two-state solution. So the area between the river and the sea can be partitioned. Alternatively, you can have just one single state. When you say from the river to the sea, it depends obviously on what kind of one single state you have in mind. Today, we see that among Palestinians, there has been a significant increase among those who believe that a one-state solution in which Israeli Jews and Palestinians would have equal rights, one person, one vote, is the best way to go, because the two-state solution is not feasible or is not practical. And obviously, if you do not support this kind of a one-state solution from the river to the sea, you might still support a one-state solution, but one that either expels the Jews or discriminates against them. So among Palestinians, just like it is among Israeli Jews in the joint Israeli-Palestinian surveys that we conduct, we find a variety of opinion among those who favor a one-state solution. The largest percentage in both societies remain committed to a two-state solution, although the majority that we used to see in the past has disappeared. We no longer have a majority in favor of a two-state solution. Today, our most recent survey, joint survey, was in June. It showed approximately 43% of Israeli Jews and 43% of Palestinians in favor of a two-state solution. But if you look at our joint surveys 10 years back, you could find 70% of Israeli Jews and Palestinians in favor of a two-state solution. With the decline of support for the two-state solution, we have seen a significant increase in support for this idea of a one-state solution. The increase over the last decade has been in the percentage of those who believe in one democratic one-state solution. Jews and Palestinians would have equal rights, one person, one vote.
So the slogan refers to, try not to put words in different people's mouths, but it relates to some form or fashion to a one state from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, I guess.
Yes, this is mandatory Palestine, or historic Palestine, or greater land of Israel. It depends on how you describe this geographic area. The river to the sea refers to that state or to that entity.
Is there any context? And is there any? I guess is there any other in the Palestinian context? Does that slogan garner any other kind of meaning other than a one-state solution?
Well, as I said earlier, one-state solution could have a lot of meanings. Not all one-state solution supporters, not all one-staters refer to a democratic state with equal rights for Jews and Palestinians. Some, particularly among the Islamists, would like to see a one-state solution in which either Jews are expelled or are denied equal rights.
I guess that's probably the most common context that we find that slogan put in is definitely not just definitely more violent, or not necessarily violent, but a disappearance of Jewish protection and Jewish sovereignty. But it doesn't. I guess my broader concern is that it doesn't necessarily mean that for everyone amongst the Palestinians. How many people? And I think you've mentioned this in one of the lectures that you gave here at the University of Arizona. Amongst the youth, amongst the millennial generation, what is their opinion moving forward? Where is their mindset on the status of negotiations, one state, two state, etc.?
Most of the youth in this case would refer to those between the ages of 18 and 29. But obviously you can look at, if you just look at the 18 to 22, for example, you would find much greater support for the idea of a one-state solution with equal rights. Today, among the youth, this is the idea that is most attractive to them. This applies to 18 to 29 as well as 18 to 22, but certainly among the 18 to 22, there is a larger percentage in favor of this idea. Among the Palestinians as a whole, today there's approximately 1/3. This is of all age groups, both West Bank and Gaza. About 1/3 are in favor of one state with equal rights. If you look at Islam, those who advocate a one state along an Islamist kind of definition of that state, it would be less than 20%. If you look at the two-state solution, it's lower than 40%. I'm now talking about the youth, the group that we're talking about. Over the last decade, we have seen significant increase among this group, this age group, in favor of a one-state solution. For the most part, the youth are driven, in addition to what I said earlier about feasibility, which affects most Palestinians. Those who turn to the one-state idea tend to believe that the two-state solution has no chance of ever happening, and therefore people need to look for realistic alternative, and a one-state solution seems to be the most realistic alternative. But in addition to that, among the youth, we see considerable belief that sovereignty and independence are not the kind of goal that they look forward to want to achieve. They seem to be more focused on wanting to have liberties, freedoms. Essentially, they believe that they today are denied rights that are provided to Israeli Jews, and they want to have the same rights that Israeli Jews have. So it's to them, it's an abandonment of the traditional Palestinian demand for self-determination in the form of sovereignty and independence. This is the major change that the youth are currently introduced in the internal Palestinian discourse. They seem to be willing to abandon this historic demand for a Palestinian state in favor of a shift to a discourse that demands equal rights.
And these are the Palestinians who are living in Israel proper or living in Palestine?
No, at the moment we're just talking about those who live in Palestine, in this case, West Bank and Gaza.
So there's another group of Palestinians that are just looking for equal rights with Israelis, as opposed to looking for sovereignty or even stateness.
Yes, among the youth, as I said, it is driven by both factors. The issue of feasibility. Now, if you overcome this obstacle, you can see a lot of the youth going back to supporting a two-state solution. So we need to keep in mind that a lot of those who advocate today for a one-state solution do so because they have lost any hope in the establishment through diplomacy and negotiations of a two-state solution.
Is there a difference in your polling data amongst the Palestinians in Gaza versus the Palestinians in the West Bank along this issue?
Yes, there are differences. There is greater support for a one-state solution in the West Bank than there is in Gaza. This is not to say if people understand what a two-state solution is, and if they can be convinced that it is feasible, if you put these two together, and if you describe how this state will come about, what are the borders, where would the capital be, and so on and so forth. If you present that to the public, we see significant rise in the level of support for the two-state solution. If you just, and this applies to Gaza as well as the West Bank. Oh, wow. So if the idea of a two-state solution is presented in a manner that seems feasible to people, if it refers to a two-state solution based on the lines of 1967 with swaps, with East Jerusalem as a capital for the Palestinian state, West Jerusalem for a capital for the state of Israel, a just solution to the refugee problem, you can find significant support for that idea in both West Bank and Gaza, a majority support.
And a lot of people, of course, in our political discourse, particularly here in the West, we talk about the differences between Hamas and Fatah or the PA, and we consider Hamas to be more extreme and Fatah PA to be much more moderate, if you will. Is along the lines of this conversation, is that accurate? Is that an accurate portrayal?
Certainly. There are essentially two value systems in Palestinian society today, and these two value systems essentially create two constituencies, one constituency that supports Hamas and one constituency that supports Fatah, and other similar political parties and factions. The value system that one can consider as Hamas's base is what we call Islamism. These are people who tend to be very religious. They tend to believe that there is no separation between state and religion. They tend to identify themselves in terms of their identity as Muslims, first and foremost. In Palestinian society today, approximately 30% fall in this category. The overwhelming majority of those, 85 to 90% of them, vote for Hamas and would consider themselves Hamas supporters. Their views are very different from the other group, which is the rest of the Palestinians, who tend to be much less religious or not religious at all. They tend to believe in the separation between state and religion. Their identity, they would say, is Palestinian first and foremost. And so this group, the second group, has traditionally been the one that has advocated for a two-state solution. For the last 50 years or so, this has been an idea that the nationalists have started to talk about. In 1988, this idea became the official position of the PLO and all other nationalists. And for a long time, among public opinion, in the surveys we've been conducting, until recently, a majority of Palestinians and an overwhelming majority of the nationalists were in favor of the idea of a two-state solution. A majority of the nationalists remain today in favor of a two-state solution. This does not change, but they are not the majority of all Palestinians. If you add the Islamists, then you do not have a majority. As I said earlier, we have about 43% in favor of a two-state solution today. Among the nationalists, however, it is indeed a majority. So you have these two value systems that lead to two major political parties. In the case of the nationalists, of course, there are others as well. And there are major differences between the two groups. Islamists tend to have views regarding Israel that are almost the contradiction of what the nationalists stand for in terms of accepting the legitimacy of the state of Israel, willing to live in peace, security, and cooperation, and so on and so forth.
The variance is there. The nationalists tend to be aligned with Fatah and the West Bank, and the Muslimists tend to be associated with Gaza and Hamas. Is that fair, or?
No. You can find the two value systems and this division in terms of political affiliation in both the West Bank and Gaza. However, you're right. In Gaza, Gaza tends to be more religious and more Islamist and more Hamas than the West Bank. But of course, Fatah is also very strong in Gaza. Hamas is still not weak in the West Bank. So both the West Bank and Gaza are divided along the lines that I described earlier. But we do today see significantly more support in Gaza for Islamism and for Hamas than there is in the West Bank.
It creates a very complex picture of the people, and even conflict in the meaning of different sides in the conflict there. I just want to, after getting kind of that mapping of people and parties and ideas, return back to this slogan. Is the slogan "From the River to the Sea"? Is it invoked at all by the nationalists? It seems to be invoked certainly by the more religious, but is it invoked also by the nationalists, the Palestinian nationalists, who tend, as you said, to support two-state solution?
Well, to be honest, the term "from the river to the sea" is not used by either side today. Most people refer to the one-state solution or to one state when referring to a solution. There is nothing called river to the sea as a solution. People say a one-state solution now. Occasionally, people do mention that. If you do not, if someone feels that you're not under, he's trying to tell you where this one station will be created. They can either say in what now Israel, West Bank, and Gaza, or in mandatory Palestine, or in historic Palestine, or in between the river and the sea. So they are all terms that refer to the same thing. But the term "from the river to the sea" is one that is rarely used in the discourse today.
Is it something that Western people have kind of latched onto as part of their political, because the Palestinian Israeli conflict fits into Western political discourse? Is it something that you think is more invoked in the West than it is in the region?
No. This used to be a term that has been used very often in the discourse among Palestinians. If you go back 50, 70 years or more, certainly this has been something that has been in the use It was very clear at that time what it meant. This was before the Palestinians started to move away from their rigid, hardline position, demanding a Palestinian state in the entire area between the river and the sea. So that's how it originated long time ago. But as Palestinians started to move away from that in the mid-70s, long time ago, we started to see the use of the term disappearing, and it is now very rarely used.
Why do you think? I know Professor Hill from Temple, when he invoked it, he invoked it. He said that his meaning was that he wanted justice for Palestinians from the river to the sea. Do you think? Why do you think he invoked it in his speech? Do you think he just
since I don't know him personally,
right.
I really have no idea where or why he said what he said and what exactly he meant by it. From what I understood later on, when he explained what he meant, it seems he was referring to the idea of one democratic state that is used here today by one-staters. That is equal rights for Jews and Palestinians. This seems to be what in terms of what he explained, is what he was referring to. In this case, I think he should have used that term. I don't know why he used the other term, from the river to the sea, to refer to that. It might be that he found that to be much clearer in his mind as to what he meant, but I think it could have raised questions along the lines that you have raised by asking about the differences among Palestinians in the interpretation of the term.
Well, I don't want to get you in the place where you're trying to explain his mentality at all. That's not my point, and I know that he's tried to explain his position, but in my mind, and hearing it, I've being involved in, we've hosted conferences and you've spoken at them, and I've never actually thought about the use of the slogan. I've never, and I don't hear it that often, but I've never actually thought about its context, and we thought it might be important to have somebody who's familiar with it and familiar with its meaning, as well as where the mentality rests within the Palestinian population today, explain that for us and for our viewers. So I really appreciate your time, sir.
You're welcome. Good talking to you, John.